back. This is day 2 of our sourdough lesson. We fed the starter and it's been sitting in the fridge overnight. And you can see there it's it's very, very happy today. Very bubbly. Let's see if we can get a better picture of that. There you go. Now we're going to start the dough. And I've got this kind of focused on the mixer so that you'll be able to see in there, because I really want you to see what's going on in there. Over here I have my electronic scale. It's very important that you have an electronic scale because everything in baking is by weight. You can make cookies and things like that by measurement, but if you're going to talk bread, you're going to have to talk weight. Most big recipes are by weight, and almost all baking recipes, including the pizza dough recipe that we'll be discussing later, are all done by weight. That's the way it is. It's more accurate, and with this sort of thing, you need accuracy, but you don't. Because as you're going to see, the recipe calls for precise amounts of starter and water and flour and salt, and flour is the variable depending on the humidity in the air, the thickness of your starter, and the mood of the flour. And believe me, it sometimes comes down to the mood of the flour. So we're going to take our bowl, and if you have a mixer, use it if it has a dough hook on it. If it doesn't and you want to get a new mixer, get the biggest one you can. As you can see, I have a DeLonghi here, 7-quart, and it's very powerful, which makes for easy bread making. Now I put the bowl on the scale and zeroed it. This way you don't have to put things in one bowl and measure them, especially this wet stuff like this starter. You don't have to measure and go from bowl to bowl to bowl because you're going to lose a little bit as you go. And we're going to do 18 ounces. And you can see the consistency there. Very bubbly, very happy. Going to go slow toward the end. As we want as close to 18 ounces as we can. That's a tad over, but that's okay. This isn't a game show. That's 18 ounces of starter. Now I'm going to re-zero, and we're going to do 21 ounces of water. I use filtered water. Use whatever you've got. 21 ounces. I didn't have a single container big enough, so a little over, that's okay. Lock this in over here. Don't get dizzy. Move you over just a little bit. You can see into that bowl a little bit better, as I want you to be able to see the texture and what's going on in here. At first we're going to start with a standard mixing paddle. Now this is a little over 3 pounds of flour. Standard all-purpose flour. I buy it by the 25-pound bag. And we're going to put about a little over half of that flour in the bowl. Over here, in case I forget, we've got 2 tablespoons of salt. That's going to go in after a little while. Put that mixer down. What we're looking for here is a very loose, almost pancake batter, almost the consistency of our starter. It's okay if it's lumpy. That's That's not a problem. A little bit more flour. See how that's kind of like cookie dough, a little bit thicker than the starter. That's about what we're looking for. And that's probably about 2/3 of our flour in there right now. We're just going to make sure that's fairly well together. I'm going to go grab a spatula and we're going to scrape that down. Alright. That's fairly smooth now. It doesn't have to be super smooth. You're just wanting all of the flour incorporated. You don't want any pockets of flour on the bottom. Let's see. This is also the time that we take off the standard mixer paddle. It's done its job. Right now, the water is interacting with the protein in the flour, the gluten, and it's creating sheets. When gluten forms up, it forms up in sheets, and those sheets are what makes the bubbles in bread. Yes, it is like a glue. That's why they use it for wallpaper. It's very efficient. And you can see that's already very sticky. What we're going to do now is what the French call an autolyse. And I cannot stress to you the importance of this pause. Excuse me, you need to let this flour develop. The only way to do that is to give it literally 20 minutes sitting just like this. I'm going to pause the tape, set a timer for 20 minutes, and in 20 minutes you're going to see quite a difference in the appearance of that dough and how it looks when it's being stirred by the mixer, okay? See you in 20 minutes. Well, that was certainly a quicker 20 minutes for you than it was for me. It's been sitting. Nothing has changed here, at least from your point of view yet. Now we're going to put the dough hook in. If you don't have a dough hook, as I said before, don't use your mixer. It doesn't work with regular paddles, as you're going to see in just a few minutes here. I would have a spatula around just to scrape down the flour. We're just going to start by adding a little bit more flour. Now, this was slightly over 3 pounds. One recipe that I've worked with says 3 pounds and 3 ounces. I used that for a long time. It's just a little bit drier than you really want for that good texture. I'll let that dough hook work. You're never going to really see me go above the minimum speed with the mixer. We don't need to shred the dough, we just need to work it. We need it to knead. And just so you know, I'm probably going to be editing out portions of this because it takes about 20 minutes to get the dough to its finished stage from this point. One thing we are going to do now that we're starting to work the dough, now those sheets of gluten have formed in there over the 20-minute autolyse. Now we're going to stretch them and fold them and stretch them and fold them, and this is what makes the really good texture of the bread, along with how wet we leave this dough. This is 2 tablespoons of salt. This salt chemically changes the dough. It gets a little bit tougher, so if you hear your mixer start to bog down a tiny bit, that's why. Now, my mixing technique here is adopted from a gentleman by the name of Jeff Verasano off of his website with his recipe for pizza dough. And when we get to pizza dough sometime in the future, most of the recipe is adapted from his. The idea, what we're doing right now is we're kneading the dough. It doesn't look like it, doesn't much look like dough, but right now we're doing most of the work of the kneading of this dough before it gets to the true dough ball stage. Because this mixer, as powerful as it is, will shut down. You can burn out a motor on a mixer trying to mix this dough. It's ridiculously thick at that point, and it's too much for any non-commercial grade set it on the floor and bolt it type of mixer. After we've done this for about 5 to 8 minutes, then we are going to start adding more flour. So I'm going to pause the tape and let it run for about 5 minutes, and we'll come back and you can see how we finish it. Welcome back. It's been about 5 minutes, and you can see that it's a nice smooth consistency now. We've got a little bit of grain to it still, but not a lot. I'm going to start adding more flour now. You don't want to add too much at a time. You don't want to overload your mixer. Add in a cup or two, and then wait for that flour to get worked in to the dough. Scrape it down if you need to, if you're really type A and want to get it mixed in quicker, that's fine. As Alton Brown says, you really can't over-knead the dough. If you were to leave this going for another half an hour, that might be a bit much, but sourdough is pretty tough stuff. As you can see, as it starts to thicken up here toward the end of the process, that it's going to start turning into a true dough. And it's also going to start climbing up the dough hook. It's one of those things, it depends on the design of your dough hook. To a point it's okay. If it starts to climb out of the bowl, then knock it down back in there. You don't want it getting away from you. Start to hear the grinding, a little bit of bogging down in the mixer as the dough gets a little bit tougher. That's normal. This is where your half horsepower old school mixer with the tiny little dough hook, this is about the time that it stops, and then you just have to mix the rest on your own. But if you have a nice strong mixer, which is the reason I bought this one, you can see now how it's pulling away from the sides. Still hasn't pulled away from the bottom, and it still is very, very sticky consistency. This is almost there. We've got a couple of cups worth of flour left, and we'll be at the dough stage.